The text from my wife landed at 6:18 p.m., right as I was draining pasta in a cloud of steam. Stuck in traffic. Might be home really late. I replied without thinking, the way you do when you trust someone with your whole life. It's okay, just drive safe. I snapped a photo of the sauce simmering and sent that too with a heart. The stove light made the pan look like a little red planet. I plated dinner for one and sat at the kitchen island, trying to enjoy quiet. Outside, dusk soaked the street a deep blue that made every porch light glow a little warmer. Our house looked the way we'd always dreamed it would. Painted door, bikes on hooks, dog toys half hidden under the couch. I ate slowly, let the radio play baseball updates, and tried not to think about how often her job had kept her late this past month. Quarter-end crunch, she'd say, with a weary smile. Extra meetings, she'd add, tossing me a tired kiss as she grabbed her laptop bag. I believed her because belief is the easiest habit to keep when it's about someone you love. Half an hour later, I rinsed my plate, patted the dog, and grabbed my phone to check the weather. That's when the small gray icon in the corner of the screen caught my eye, the car app. We had installed the GPS feature after our hatchback got bumped in a parking lot last winter. It was a safety thing. We barely used it. I tapped it without a plan, more out of habit than suspicion. A map popped up. A little blue dot pulsed on a street 2 neighborhoods over. The address snapped into focus, and my chest tightened at the name beside it. I knew that street. It belonged to a coworker of hers, Daniel, the guy who'd once helped her carry a box of brochures to the car while I sat in the passenger seat recovering from a sprained ankle. He'd seemed nice that day. Easy smile, friendly voice. He'd waved at me like we were all in this together, whatever this was, in a parking lot on a windy afternoon. The app said our car had been idle for 20 minutes. I didn't explode. I didn't send angry texts. I just stared, letting information stack itself in neat, unsettling piles. Stuck in traffic. Parked outside a coworker's house. 20 minutes. I clicked the little arrow that said, Get Route. The screen suggested a 15-minute drive. The pasta in my stomach turned to clay. My dog Roscoe put his head on my knee, sensing something off. I rubbed behind his ears and said, Not tonight, buddy. He wagged anyway. I set the phone face down and took a breath that felt like it could use a seatbelt. I'm not a jealous person. I don't like assumptions. But I also know that trust isn't a blindfold. It's a choice to see clearly and still believe. Right now, seeing clearly meant at least acknowledging that the facts didn't line up. I texted, Everything okay? Want me to keep your dinner warm? No response. 3 dots appeared, then vanished. The kitchen clock ticked too loudly. I remembered a day not long ago when she'd left early for a strategy breakfast, a phrase so corporate it felt invented on the spot. She'd laughed at my face and promised to bring me a muffin. She did, and we joked about how dry it was. Little moments like that stitch a life together, but stitches can loosen if nobody checks them. I walked to the garage under the fluorescent light, pulled an old beach cooler off a shelf, and took out the 2 lawn chairs tucked inside. Busy hands, calmer mind. I checked the oil in the lawnmower, which didn't need checking. Then I came back inside and tried the app again. The blue dot hadn't moved. I forwarded the live location to my own email, then sent it to her with a short note. Thought you were stuck on the freeway. Everything all right? I stood next to the window and watched the street absorb the night. A jogger passed. A neighbor dragged a trash bin to the curb. My phone remained silent. Maybe Daniel lived with roommates and they were planning a surprise for her. Maybe she'd pulled over because she felt dizzy. Maybe 1,000 maybes. I didn't need answers right now. I needed a plan that wouldn't wreck us if the worst idea turned out to be wrong. I slid the phone into my pocket and did what I always do when my nerves try to outrun me. I cleaned. I loaded the dishwasher like it was a puzzle. I folded towels. I washed a pan so thoroughly it looked showroom new. The act of making order kept me from imagining chaos. At 7:25 p.m., another text arrived. Sorry, long day. Don't wait up. Might crash on the office couch. The map still showed the same address. I took a screenshot. Then I called her. Straight to voicemail. Her outgoing message, upbeat, a little rushed, hit me like a note from an earlier, simpler version of our life. I walked to the closet and pulled on a jacket, not to go confront anyone, not yet. I needed air and perspective, both of which our block provides at night. I left Roscoe with a chew toy and stepped outside, locking the door by muscle memory. The sky hung low, thick with summer haze. I walked to the corner, past the bakery with the chalkboard sign promising cinnamon rolls. Tomorrow, maybe. I crossed to the park, sat on a bench beneath a lamppost that hummed like a lazy bee, and opened my phone. The blue dot remained on Daniel Street. Fresh timestamp. Parked. I called my brother Nolan, who is good at not letting me skip ahead to conclusions. He answered like always, cheerful and a little too loud. "What's up, Chef?" "You ever get a text that rearranges your evening?" I asked. "All the time. Usually from my boss and rarely with lottery numbers." I told him the basics. Not the part where my stomach had dropped through the floor, just the facts, text about traffic, GPS, coworker's address, still parked, no callback. He listened. That's his superpower. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I want to not regret my next decision." "Then don't make a dramatic one. If you go over there, you'll remember the look on her face for the rest of your life, no matter what you find. If you sit and stew, you'll build a story, and maybe it'll be the wrong story. Find the middle." The middle? Ask for clarity in a way future you won't hate. Screenshot, document, keep calm. No grand speeches tonight. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "You're right." He exhaled. "This isn't proof of anything except weirdness. Treat it like weirdness." We joked for a minute about the proper number of Doritos required to survive a crisis. Then I hung up and walked home with my jaw unclenched. Back inside, I opened my laptop, started a blank note, and wrote down times, messages, locations. Not as ammunition, but as memory insurance. If we talked later and she said one thing while my mind remembered another, at least we'd have a timeline. I saved the note and closed the lid. At 8:03, the blue dot began to move. The car turned onto the main road, then onto the highway. The little icon pulsed steadily toward home. My shoulders dropped an inch. I met her in the driveway because I wanted the night air around us if the conversation went sideways. She parked, saw me, and gave a bright wave that didn't reach her eyes. She stepped out with her laptop bag and a paper cup from a cafe I'd never heard her mention. "Hey," she said, jogging a step like she was running late to something soft and harmless. "Sorry about tonight. You would not believe." "I forwarded you the car location earlier," I said gently. "It showed you outside Daniel's place for a while." She stopped. The bag strap slid on her shoulder. For a second, she looked at me like we were strangers meeting on a platform where our trains had just gone in opposite directions. "He's near the office," she said. "We had to drop off some stuff from the client. His home printer is better than the office's. It was going to be quick." And then we talked about the project. She frowned. "Why are you tracking me?" "I open the app like I open weather. We got it together for safety. I got worried when your text said traffic, but the map said you were parked at a house." She glanced at the sky, then back. "You don't trust me." "I want to," I said. "That's why I'm asking instead of assuming." Her throat worked. She leaned against the car door and rubbed a smudge on the window with her thumb. "It was innocent," she said. "I thought telling you I'd be late would be enough. I didn't think—" She stopped, searching for a version of events that would hold. "Call him," I said, keeping my voice level. "Put it on speaker. Ask him to confirm." She stared at me, startled, then pulled out her phone. Her fingers hovered. "It's late," she said quietly. "Then he won't answer," I replied. She typed. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring, a man's voice came through, warm and casual. "Hey, everything good?" "Yeah," she said. "Can you tell my husband we were finishing the client printouts?" A pause, barely a breath. "Sure," Daniel said, but the ease had drained out of his tone. "We were working. All good." "Thanks," she said quickly, and ended the call before anyone could say more. We stood there while a moth circled the porch light. "I'm not your enemy," I said, "but I'm also not a bystander in my own life." She nodded slowly, that careful nod people use when they're carrying glass. "I know," she whispered. We went inside. Roscoe skittered across the floor and circled our legs. She put her bag down, then touched my arm. "I'm exhausted," she said. "Can we talk in the morning?" "Sure." The word felt like a handshake with a stranger. She showered. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the ceiling fan. Something about the call gnawed at me, The pause, maybe, the rushed ending, the paper cup from the cafe, the GPS dot sitting still for 20 minutes. All of it swirled like leaves in a gutter. I didn't sleep much. At 2:10 a.m. I walked to the kitchen for water and saw her phone face down on the counter, charging. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to be the person who snoops. But I did nothing while my mind ran sprints. Morning arrived with a gray sky and a news anchor announcing local traffic like a drum roll. She brewed coffee and set a mug in front of me. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have called, not just texted. I'll do better." I nodded and asked about her day. She answered with precise details. It sounded normal, tidy, complete. It almost settled me. Almost. Then my email pinged with a reply to the live location I'd forwarded the night before. The subject line read, "Thought you should know." I opened it. A short message from a neighbor on Daniel's Street explained that our car had been parked blocking part of his driveway, and he'd snapped a photo in case he needed to complain later. The attached picture showed our car in the dusk glow. In the photo, the passenger door stood open. A woman's silhouette leaned toward a man framed in the porch light. You couldn't see faces. You could see proximity. My coffee cooled untouched. I closed the laptop slowly. In the living room, Roscoe thumped his tail against the rug, waiting for the morning walk. The house looked the same. My life didn't. I looked at my wife across the table and saw someone I loved sitting in a story that no longer made sense. And I understood, with the quiet certainty of a clock, that love doesn't end in a blaze most days. It flickers, asks a few final questions, and waits to see whether it will be answered or left to dim on its own. When you want part 2, I'll tell you what I did next and why I chose caution over fireworks, at least at first. Morning light spilled through the kitchen blinds like nothing had changed, but everything had. She moved around quietly, buttering toast, humming the same tune she always did when trying to pretend calm. I watched her pour coffee with that deliberate care people use when they need something normal to hold on to. I hadn't mentioned the neighbor's email yet, the image of her. Standing too close to Daniel still burned in my mind. Not incriminating enough to accuse, but clear enough to unsettle every instinct I had about her honesty. I knew if I spoke too soon, it would just turn into another fog of explanations and half-truths. I needed to see where truth would lead if I stopped chasing it. She broke the silence first. "You didn't sleep," she said softly. "Neither did you," I answered. Her eyes flicked to me and then away. "We can't keep doing this. The mistrust, the questions, I hate it." "Then give me something to trust." She exhaled, set the knife down, and said, "I told you what happened. We printed the proposal, talked about next week's presentation, and that's it. The reason I stayed so long was because I was trying to calm him down. His promotion fell through, and he was upset. That's why I didn't want to tell you. It would sound suspicious." I nodded but said nothing. The story sounded neat, maybe too neat. I decided not to push. Sometimes silence invites truth more effectively than interrogation. That day, I worked from home. The house felt unusually large, like it was stretching its walls to listen. Every sound, her text tone, the shuffle of her shoes by the door, made me hyper-aware of how fragile our peace was. When she left for work, I waited 10 minutes, then opened my laptop. The GPS app blinked in the corner of the screen. Curiosity isn't always healthy, but it's human. Her car was heading toward the office. Normal. I closed the laptop, took Roscoe for a long walk, and told myself to breathe. By noon, I'd convinced myself to let it go, until my phone buzzed again, an unknown number with a simple message. Still believe the traffic story? No name, no context, just the digital equivalent of a whisper in the dark. My first thought was that it had to be a prank. Maybe someone from her office stirring trouble. I texted back, "Who is this?" No reply. I didn't show her the message that evening. She came home with takeout, cheerful, overly so. She talked about her day like someone reading from a script, too precise, too edited. When I asked about Daniel, she said he'd taken a few days off, and that was that. Later, when she was in the shower, I checked the GPS again. The car log history showed one unexpected trip from the day before. The stop at Daniel's Street lasted 38 minutes, not 20. And after leaving there, she'd driven to a parking lot by the lake for another 45 before heading home. That wasn't the route from her office. I closed the app and stared at the ceiling until I realized my jaw was locked. Then, For the first time since all this started, I felt something sharper than confusion. I felt insulted. The next morning, I told her I had a late meeting at work just to see what she'd do. She kissed me on the cheek, said, "Don't stay out too late," and left with her usual smile. I watched her taillights vanish at the end of the street, then followed a few minutes later, taking a different car, my brother's pickup. It felt strange, like I'd stepped into a scene from someone else's life. But truth sometimes hides in places where comfort can't follow. I parked near Daniel's neighborhood just as the sun began to dip. After 10 minutes, her car appeared, slowing in front of his house before turning onto the side street. My pulse hammered, but I forced myself to stay calm. She parked behind a tall hedge that nearly hid the driveway. A minute later, she got out carrying a small tote and a box. Daniel opened the door. They talked. She handed him the box. He smiled. They didn't touch. Then she turned back toward the car, and he waved goodbye. The whole thing lasted maybe 5 minutes, ordinary, harmless almost. Yet somehow it still didn't sit right. Because when she left, she didn't go straight home. She drove toward that same lakeside parking lot again. I followed, careful, headlights dimmed. She pulled into a space near the water. I parked far back where I could barely see her silhouette. She just sat there, hands on the wheel, staring at the horizon as the sky turned orange. 10 minutes passed, then 15. She didn't meet anyone. She didn't call. She just sat, silent, motionless, like she was waiting for courage to find her. Finally, she leaned back, wiped her face, and drove home. I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I told her dinner was ready and we ate like two actors trapped in the wrong scene. She smiled at my jokes, but her eyes looked tired, the way guilt tires you when it's been running too long. Later, when she fell asleep, I checked her phone. Not messages, just her photos. The most recent ones were harmless. Work documents, a picture of Roscoe, a coffee cup. But the deleted folder held one image. Her car mirror reflecting Daniel's house. Time-stamped the night she said she'd crashed on the office couch. That was enough. Not for revenge yet, but for clarity. The next morning I printed the photo, folded it neatly, and placed it under her mug. I didn't add words. She would know what it meant. Then I packed an overnight bag and drove to my brother's. When she called later, voice trembling, she asked, "Are you leaving me?" I said, "I'm giving you time to decide if you want to rebuild or keep pretending." And for once, she didn't have a ready answer, just silence, raw and real. What happened next wasn't fire or shouting. It was quieter, colder, and far more honest. 3 days passed before she showed up at my brother's house. I saw her car pull into the driveway, slow, stop, and sit there as if she were debating whether to knock. When she finally did, she looked smaller than I remembered, hair tied back, no makeup, clutching the folded photo I'd left under her mug. "I deserve that," she said, holding it up. "But please, can we talk?" I nodded and led her to the porch. The autumn air was cool and sharp, perfect for truth. She sat down, shoulders trembling. "I didn't cheat," she said. "Not physically, I swear. But emotionally, maybe I crossed a line. I liked the attention. I felt invisible at home, and when Daniel started listening, really listening, it messed with my head." Her honesty hurt more than a lie would have. "So it wasn't traffic," I said quietly. "No," she admitted. "It was confusion. I'd go sit by the lake after seeing him because I couldn't face myself. I wanted to stop but didn't know how to say I was lost." For a long time, I didn't respond. The wind rattled the porch railing. A leaf spun in circles at our feet. "You could have told me," I finally said. "We could have fixed it before it broke." She wiped her eyes. "I know. I thought I'd already lost you. I didn't realize you were waiting for me to reach back." The sadness in her voice wasn't performance, it was defeat. And I realized revenge didn't have to mean cruelty. It could mean letting someone see what they'd done, stripped of excuses. "I sent that photo to Daniel," I said. Her eyes widened. "No message, just the picture. He replied this morning. I'm sorry. She deserves better clarity than this. I'm out." She covered her mouth. "You didn't yell, you didn't post anything. You just showed him the truth?" "That's the only kind of revenge that lasts," I said. "The kind that teaches, not tears down." She nodded slowly, tears spilling. "What happens now?" "I'm not sure," I said. But we both have work to do, separately. Maybe we'll find our way back, maybe we won't. But pretending we're okay would just make us liars again. She stood, eyes red but calm. You were right to walk away. And you were right to come here, I said. She handed me the photo and whispered, keep it, as a reminder of what not to become. Then she turned, walked to her car, and drove off into the fading light. As her taillights disappeared, I felt something unexpected, relief, not joy, not victory, just peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop carrying someone else's mistakes on your back. Later that night, I deleted the GPS app, poured a drink, and sat on the porch with Roscoe asleep by my feet. The stars blinked faintly overhead, indifferent to the noise of human hearts. Sometimes revenge isn't about payback. It's about walking away with your dignity intact and leaving the truth to do the rest. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Not because I'd won, but because I finally felt free.